One of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints on Earth isn't a border or a battlefield. It's a sea, a place where trillions of dollars in global trade passes every year, where massive oil and gas reserves may lie beneath the seabed, and where powerful militaries are now building islands, deploying missiles, and challenging each other in open waters. This is the South China Sea, and the struggle to control it could shape the future balance of power in Asia. For centuries, the South China Sea was simply one of the world's busiest waterways. Cargo ships, fishing fleets, and oil tankers crossed these waters every day with little attention from the outside world. But today, this stretch of ocean has become one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints on the planet. Powerful nations are sending warships, fighter jets patrol the skies above disputed islands, and a single miscalculation here could trigger a major international crisis. At first glance, it may seem strange that so many countries are willing to risk confrontation over a patch of sea filled with scattered reefs and tiny islands. Many of these islands are barely visible above water. Some disappear entirely during high tide. Yet behind these small pieces of land lies one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. Nearly one-third of global maritime trade passes through the South China Sea every year. Ships carrying electronics, raw materials, food, and manufactured goods move between Asia, Europe, and the Middle East through these waters. Major economies like China, Japan, South Korea, and India rely heavily on these shipping routes to keep their industries running. Oil from the Persian Gulf travels through these sea lanes before reaching factories and power plants across East Asia. Any disruption to this maritime corridor could immediately affect the global economy. Because of this, controlling the sea routes of the South China Sea means controlling one of the most critical arteries of global trade. This is one of the main reasons why China has become increasingly assertive in the region. Over the past 2 decades, Beijing has claimed vast areas of the sea as part of its historical territory. Chinese maps outline this claim using a controversial boundary known as the 9-dash line, which stretches hundreds of miles from China's mainland and overlaps with the maritime zones of several neighboring countries. But trade routes are only one part of the story. Beneath the seabed of the South China Sea lies another powerful incentive: energy resources. Geological surveys suggest that the region may contain significant reserves of oil and natural gas. For rapidly growing economies that require enormous amounts of energy, these resources are extremely valuable. Access to new oil and gas fields could reduce dependence on imported energy and provide long-term strategic security. China, whose economy is heavily dependent on imported energy, sees the region as a potential solution to part of its future energy needs. But China is not the only country that wants access to these resources. Nations such as the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Brunei also claim parts of the sea and the potential energy reserves beneath it. This overlapping web of claims has turned the region into a complicated geopolitical puzzle where nearly every country disagrees with the others. Yet what truly transformed the situation was not just the claims themselves, but what China began to do in the region. Starting in the early 2010s, China launched an enormous construction campaign across several reefs and shoals scattered throughout the South China Sea. Using massive dredging ships, sand and rock were piled on top of submerged reefs to create entirely new artificial islands. Where there was once only coral and shallow water, new land began to appear. Airstrips long enough for military aircraft were built. Radar installations and missile systems were installed. Deepwater ports capable of hosting naval vessels were constructed. These islands effectively turned previously uninhabitable reefs into permanent military outposts. From a strategic perspective, these artificial islands dramatically expanded China's ability to project power across the region. Fighter jets can now land on remote airstrips hundreds of kilometers from the Chinese mainland. Surveillance systems can monitor shipping and aircraft moving across the sea. Naval forces can operate from forward bases that extend China's reach deep into Southeast Asia. For neighboring countries, this rapid militarization has been deeply alarming. Nations like the Philippines and Vietnam argue that China is using its economic and military power to enforce territorial claims that are not recognized under international law. Fishing boats from these countries have reported being chased away from waters they had used for generations. Energy exploration vessels have been blocked or harassed near disputed areas. Tensions escalated further after an international arbitration case in 2016 ruled that China's sweeping claims in the South China Sea had no legal basis under international maritime law. The case was brought forward by the Philippines, which argued that China's claims violated the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The tribunal ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Philippines. However, China rejected the ruling entirely and continued its activities in the region. The situation becomes even more complicated when outside powers enter the picture. The United States has repeatedly stated that it does not recognize China's expansive claims in the South China Sea. For Washington, maintaining freedom of navigation through these international waters is a core strategic priority. American naval vessels regularly conduct what are known as freedom of navigation operations, sailing near disputed islands to challenge what they consider excessive territorial claims. These operations are often closely monitored by Chinese naval ships and aircraft, creating tense encounters between two of the world's most powerful militaries. While both sides usually avoid direct confrontation, the possibility of an accident or miscalculation always exists. Meanwhile, regional countries are increasingly caught in the middle. The Philippines has strengthened security cooperation with the United States as confrontations with Chinese vessels become more frequent. Vietnam has also been expanding its own naval capabilities while seeking closer defense relationships with multiple global powers. For smaller nations in Southeast Asia, the challenge is enormous. On one side stands China, the region's largest economy and a powerful military force. On the other side are global powers trying to maintain a balance of influence in the region. Navigating between these competing pressures is becoming increasingly difficult. What makes the South China Sea so dangerous is that the conflict is not about a single issue. It is about control of trade routes that power the global economy. It is about access to valuable energy resources beneath the seabed. It is about strategic military positioning across one of the world's most important maritime regions. And it is about a broader struggle over influence in Asia between rising and established powers. Every new military installation, every naval patrol, and every diplomatic confrontation adds another layer of tension to a region that has already become one of the most contested spaces on Earth. For now, ships continue to sail through these waters and global trade keeps moving. But the growing competition here shows how a few scattered islands in the South China Sea have become central to the geopolitical future of the 21st century.